Is the Mass the priest's show in any sense? How is the priest supposed to conduct himself at the Mass? And how about all those other people who help make that Mass happen? The deacon, the lector, the cantor, the choir, the extraordinary ministers of communion. What are they doing? Or really, how are they doing what they're doing? How should the Mass affect them? How does their presence add to or detract from the prayer of the people in the pews? For some insight on these questions, let's turn to that letter about the liturgy that Pope Francis sent me. He sent it to me, sent it to you, to all Catholics in the summer of 2022. And previously on this channel, we've explored how the letter teaches that we are at the Mass because we've been called there first by the earnest yearning of Jesus to be with us. We've noted the letter's explanation that if we open ourselves, the liturgy will change us. We've dealt with how we go about this openness by participating in the Mass. In other words, we've asked what our job is at the Mass. This time, let's explore what the Pope is asking of priests and other ministers at the Mass. What about those who are, in a sense, up in front and seemingly in control? Let's find out. If we haven't met, my name is Deacon Richard Hudzik, and I use this channel to hand on the faith. So let's get down to it. According to Pope Francis' letter, what is expected of the priests at Mass? And as it might apply to the different leadership roles at Mass, what about all those others up there in front? On a typical Sunday Mass, you're likely to see a deacon, oftentimes a cantor, a lector, extraordinary ministers of communion, and maybe a choir. What are all those folks on for? Maybe at the outset we can state the obvious. That is, all those ministers aside from the priest could be dispensed with, and yeah, you'll still have a Mass. This is not to say that the liturgy is not blessed by that fuller participation of other people. It is only to acknowledge that without a priest, you ain't got a Mass. The priest occupies the essential role at the Mass. As a consequence, the priest's demeanor, attitude, and way of leading the worship is key. In a minimalist sort of speech, you can say that the priest sets the tone. He's the captain of the ship, so to speak, although that metaphor really limps as it ignores that the priest acts inspired by the Holy Spirit and serves the Mass in persona Christi. The Pope sees the temptation of the modern world that seeks to either justify oneself, I'll save me, I don't need God, we might say, or we may have an idea that the only criterion of truth is me and my own desires. In a world torn between Pelagianism, I'll do it myself, and Gnosticism, disdain of the body, the Pope aptly describes the liturgy as an antidote to those twin ancient and modern errors. But it is an antidote only if we rediscover every day the truth of the Christian celebration. And what is that truth? The truth is that, to quote the letter, the liturgy is the priesthood of Christ, revealed to us and given in his paschal mystery, rendered present and active by means of signs addressed to the senses, water, oil, bread, wine, gestures, words, so that the Spirit, plunging us into the paschal mystery, might transform every dimension of our life, conforming us more and more to Christ. Now, those powerful words are words of Pope Francis, and it's mighty important and it's mighty deep. And this effort to rediscover the truth and the beauty of the liturgy requires that the priests observe the rubrics, the stage directions, for lack of a better term, observe the rubrics given to him. But this calls for not being satisfied with only a scrupulous adherence, nor does it suggest that the priest should be dismissive of the rubrics or superficial. In seeking this balance, the Pope reiterates, quote, every aspect of the celebration must be carefully attended to, and every rubric must be observed. Such attention would be enough to prevent robbing from the assembly what is owed to it, namely the paschal mystery celebrated according to the ritual that the Church sets down. This caution of seeking to balance the priest's faithful adherence to the rubrics with a desire to avoid all appearances of indifference is spoken of by the letter as arising out of the need to be free from the subjective tastes or preferences of the celebrant. The Pope states that the priest needs to be seeking the action of the Holy Spirit in each and every Mass. Or in other words, to answer one of the questions raised at the beginning of this video, no, the Mass is not the priest's show. The Pope elaborates on this theme later in the letter when he offers some more concrete words and suggests several extremes, all of which are to be avoided. And to quote the Pope, he says the following ways of presiding are inadequate. And he sets up these oppositions, quote, rigid austerity or an exasperating creativity, a spiritualizing mysticism or practical functionalism, a rushed briskness or an overemphasized slowness, a sloppy carelessness or an excessive finickiness, a superabundant friendliness or priestly impassibility. All of these are, according to the Holy Father, symptoms or an acting out of an excessive personalism. And as he continues to beat this message forward, he says that these styles of presiding can express, he's tough here, that these styles of presiding can express a poorly concealed mania to be the center of attention. As I say, tough words to be sure. But if these cautions apply to the priest celebrant, so too do they apply to anyone up there on the altar, deacon, lector, cantor, Eucharistic minister, or choir. The Mass is only about us to the extent it is an occasion when we celebrate God's prior love for us. It's not an occasion to exhibit our own psychological needs for attention. Again, tough. I guess that's what we call tough love. It can be fairly said that the cautions are so strong because what is at stake is so immense. To describe the enormity of what the Mass is, the Desiderio letter speaks of the priest's role in fostering the assembly's participation in the desire the risen Lord has to eat the Passover with us. It is the priest's manner in words and gestures that help the assembly in this, or sadly, have the potential to interfere with that communion. And words that I find so moving as well as loving toward our priests. The Holy Father speaks of the priest at Mass as being, quote, placed in the middle between Jesus' burning heart and the heart of each of the faithful, which is the object of the Lord's love, unquote. To preside at Eucharist is to be plunged into the furnace of God's love. Being present at the furnace, all of us ought to be awestruck at watching and being a part of and participating in this fiery furnace of love. What a miracle takes place on the altar right in front of us all. It is the privilege of all ministers at the Mass to help this. The Pope's caution against subjectivism or furthering one's own ego by means of the Mass applies with equal force to us all. A few final notes and another challenge and blessing upon our priests. In the concluding paragraphs of the letter, the Pope notes how the Mass changes the priest at his deepest. By extension, those of us who serve at Mass cooperate in that transformation and are changed ourselves. And again, to quote the letter, Pope Francis says, quote, the priest cannot recount the Last Supper to the Father without himself becoming a participant in it. He cannot say, take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body which will be given up for you, and not live the same desire to offer his own body, his own life, for the people entrusted to him. This is what happens in the exercise of the priest's ministry, end quote. You and I are privileged to be there, to pray with the priest, with the community, with each other. I don't think we can merely watch the priest be transformed. That turns us into spectators. That is what turns us into consumers of the Mass. No, there's a miracle taking place. We can't just watch it if we understand it. We will be changed too, because we will be accepting that invitation to be with Jesus, just as he has for all ages fervently desired. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and subscribe. And by doing either or both of these actions, you're helping the YouTube system discover this channel, and I hope that will help evangelize the world. So God bless you for being with me and for watching. I will see you next time. Take care.